Year to you all. This is our first podcast of 2022, and we're really looking forward to it. We have a few changes here at the Completely Machinima podcast. We're going to be trying to include a few more practical specials. We did one, Phil and I did one last year on putting together a computer. This year we might do something on sound. I hope to do one with writing, with a professional writer as a guest. We'll be adding video to our podcast this year. Of course, we'll be doing our regular audio podcast, but we started a YouTube channel, which will include the video for each of ours. So as you can see, we've all really gone out of our way to look as nicely as possible. Tracy, you've certainly done it well.
Thank you very much.
I put on pants.
I know. I really,
so did
really
I.
Happy with
Lipstick.
that.
It's not a filter.
Yeah. And then, Damien, you've got that Jim Morrison look from The Doors down really well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to try it as an experiment and see what happens. We're also doing a couple of other things. We're going to be combining news with our discussion, meaning that if a news story triggers some interesting ideas about Machinima, we'll launch into that. It's an experiment, so we'll see how it goes. So with that out of the way, and with a happy new year to you all, I hope you have a great new year. I'd like to introduce our regulars. Phil Rice, who is one of the most interesting Machinima filmmakers ever. I'm really happy you're back with us this year.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Sure thing. And Damien Valentine, another great Machinima filmmaker and promoter of Machinima. He's been around forever. Hi, Damien.
Hi, and thank you so much.
And Tracy Harwood, our resident Cerebus, the brain of the organization with legs. So we're really happy Tracy has written some really interesting books, including one on Machinima recently, or actually last year, Machinima history. Welcome, and we're glad you're back.
Thank you very much for
not to be confused with not to be confused with Cerberus.
Cerberus,
the dog that guards the gates of
with
hell.
How many heads?
You know?
Yeah. Don't get those confused. Another reason why Phil's on the show to rein in my
I catch all the anachronisms and such. Yes,
there you go.
You and Ray Harryhausen, huh?
Let's hit in on the news. Now, Damien, you've got some interesting stuff about NVIDIA's next AI can turn words into photorealistic images. What?
Yeah, it's a new piece of software. It's only in beta at the moment, and I was trying it earlier, and I couldn't quite figure out how to do the words part of it, because it's kind of very vague on how to use it. But it's called... Oh, I can't remember what it's called.
It's like introducing your wife. And my wife, who are you? What's
Canvas. That's what it's called. I just got found it in my notes.
Canvas. There you go.
Yes, there we go. We'll edit that bit out.
Okay. So now, how does it work? What do you do?
Right. So I tried it out earlier, and you kind of have this two squares. One's got the resulting image, and then this other square, which is where you draw in. You can put different layers in. So I couldn't figure out the words part of it, but there's this way where you can choose the type of, I'm not going to say object, but the type of thing you want to paint on the picture. So you could put mountain or rock or river or cloud, and there's a whole load of things like that. And you just draw on the left square, and you just get sort of a blob appear. And then on the right side, it will create an image of what that should actually look like. So I just did the mountain for the first time. You kind of get the shadowy mountain in the background. And I thought, well, that reminds me of the Lonely Mountain from The Hobbit. So I chose the tree forest option. So I took little trees around it, and then suddenly this forest appeared all around the mountain. And then I used the fog one, so it makes it all look really misty. Yeah. And it looked like a picture that you could spend hours painting, and it did it in seconds.
Wow. How detailed do you have to be, or can you just do a crude mountain, and it'll interpret that.
If you just basically draw a very crude triangle, you'll get a perfect mountain. And I don't know how this is going to affect Machinima just yet, because they're still just testing it and playing around with it. And at the moment, you can only have a 512 by 512 image, so it's not very high resolution. I imagine as they develop it, they'll increase that. But I do think, well, this would be really good for generating textures or for background images. If you're using iClone or Unity or Unreal,
sure.
You don't necessarily want to create a vast landscape that goes off into the distance. You just want like a map painting would in a live action film. You have something like that in the background, and you could create your image in a couple of minutes to do that, and it would look like it'd be something that you had an artist who spent a long time on.
It would be useful for you if they had a space database where you could draw your own space scene, which I think wouldn't be that difficult. Because I think they use deep learning algorithms in which you have hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures that the AI draws from in order to create the image. If you had stars and planets and things like that, you could draw a space scene that you wanted.
And well, just before I finished closed it down, I saw there's an option to import your own pictures for reference.
Oh,
so I need to try that out, because I think if you could do that, like you just said, have a picture of space or planets, it may be able to incorporate that into what it is you're drawing.
Right, because the more data you have in the database, the more accurate the prediction is of the AI.
Yeah.
And now you also said that it can do it with words, but you weren't able to get that to work, right?
Yeah, I couldn't figure out where the words option was to actually write things in, so I need to go back and check that out. But when I just found out about the software, it was being advertised as something that could generate an image from words. And I saw another one, which again I forgot the name of the other day, where it's an app you can get for your phone, which does use words, and you can pick a different theme. So I put the word Sith Lord in, and then put the Christmas theme. And so you kind of get this snowy winter village with this dark figure on it. It looks like it's got a Santa hat on. It's all kind of very... It's not like a very clear image. It's kind of distorted.
Muddy.
You kind of get the theme of it. Yeah. It's very sort of artistic rendition of what that might look like.
There's a whole raft of these now, isn't there? Where
it seemed to be a trend.
AIs are being used in some really interesting ways. I mean, that example that you gave about the drawing thing kind of implies that you actually now don't need to be able to draw, which, that's...
Yay!
You don't want to see my drawing, so that's a good thing.
Well, you can draw a stick figure, and then it looks really fantastic.
Yeah.
And the other, the other sort of text to image and text to voice type stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fascinating sort of application of AI, where you're getting text can be used to generate emotional inflection in voices and what have you. And that's been in the MetaHuman creator, Unreal's MetaHuman creator, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to see how these kind of things are evolving, I think.
I think so. Some of it's driven by the market. Businesses need a good text-to-speech because increasingly they have customer service that is done. The first layer of customer service is dealing with the AI so they can steer you in a direction. Or depending on the company, they can get rid of you, put you in an endless loop. But I think that's probably the more practical aspect of AI development for machinima filmmakers is the text-to-speech part, because it's always been a problem from the very beginning to get people together to do a recording session for audio, but also get quality audio recordings from each individual. God, I remember doing a couple sessions where even though people assured me they had good mics and I had done testing with them, their resulting audio was still awful. And I had to spend a long time cleaning it up. So using text-to-speech can be a solution, especially with the really excellent AI aided text to speech now. I mean, there have been some times where I couldn't even tell the difference. However, I think there'll be a limit to that, because if you have a script that is going to involve more nuanced relations between characters, you're not going to be able to do that with text to speech. No, whatever the advertisement is about how they, oh yes, they can adjust their tempo and you can actual emotion. No, you're not going to be able to do that. But I think for simpler things, I think that would be very helpful for machinima filmmakers.
Especially something like if you got a character just has one line of dialogue, like tickets please or something like that.
Yes.
You don't necessarily want to find someone just to record that. You can get the AI to do it. But a character like the one that you play in my Star Wars series, Juras Sabayoth, because he's very emotionally and sort of mentally unstable, that's not something I would want an AI to do. I would much rather have someone like you, Ricky, who's actually really talented.
Who's actually mentally unstable.
Genuinely.
to do it, yeah.
I wasn't going to go in that direction, but you know what I mean.
I do. Although I wouldn't put it past Nvidia to come up with a button that says mentally unstable, and you push it and it's got some kind of thing. Yeah, it's incredible. You know, every year I go to the graphics technology conference at Nvidia, and I'm always just astounded at what new benefits they've come up with for deep learning algorithms. Just remarkable. I saw one presentation in which small towns were trying to apply to the federal government for funding for high-speed internet, but they couldn't meet the criterias were so, you know how it is, government, the criterias were so onerous. So NVIDIA developed this deep learning thing that allowed them to make a copy of their town and then run through the town checking connection possibilities. And they could submit that to the federal government, which would make it easier for small towns to get high-speed internet. It was a really interesting project. Anyway, thank you for that, Damien. I
wanted to also add real quickly,
go ahead.
I'm wondering if the NVIDIA's Canvas technology, if that's going to end up, like most major things on the internet, they end up getting really propelled and moved forward by the adult industry. And so, you know, artists who currently only are able to write on like school and truck stop bathroom walls, these very rudimentary drawings, they could use NVIDIA's Canvas and turn it into something that looks photorealistic.
Well, I
use the mounting option.
I can't wait.
Ricky, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but that's just not an angle that I immediately came to. It's kind of curious how you come right to that.
Phil, that's just
shocker, scribblers, graffiti scribblers,
right? Everyone's a Banksy now.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be able to draw your own big whatevers. Thanks for that, Phil. Thanks. Moving quickly on after an embarrassing moment here. I'd like to say Blender 3.0 came out on December 7th. With a formal announcement, and it is fantastic. Now, why is Blender 3.0 important to machinima filmmakers? Well, I'll tell you why. One, it's an open source community, which it's free. It has a massive community all over the world. They support filmmaking, and they are also heavily connected to Omniverse, Unity, and Unreal, in addition to tons and tons of free plugins. Plus, it's ridiculously simple to model and create things in Blender. Previously, up to about 5 years ago, it was really hard not because the program itself was difficult, but because of the interface. The interface was this obscure, difficult, everything was backwards from other 3D. Well, they've fixed all of that. They've updated their interface. It is an excellent, very clear, very easy. And Blender 3.0 has several new additions, one of which is the asset library and the pose library, meaning that you could create your own collection of assets and drag and drop. And that includes models, effects, materials, and you could just add them, drop and drag right on. Then they have a pose library, so you can do a series of animations, pose to pose animation, set your first animation, go to your last animation, and it automatically interpolates it, and you've got a fast animation right there. Blender's also connected to Reallusion. So what I'm saying is that Blender 3.0 is the best new version of this great software, and it's connected to all the possible sources for making machinima. Game engines, even game engines will often do that. You can do mods when mods ask for, hey, we want to have these new crazy houses. You can build your own crazy house and then import it into a game. So it is really the place to go to in order to create your own unique content. And I highly recommend anybody, if you're afraid of 3D modeling, Blender 3.0 is the place to go. There's a brand new Blender guru who is one of the best tutorial creators for Blender. He redoes his how to make a donut, donut with frosting, with each new version of Blender. And he's got a brand new one out for 3.0. So if you want to try it, we'll put the link down in there. It's about 4 episodes of about 15 minutes each. He's a great teacher, and it would be a good way to learn how to model and perhaps use that in your next Machinima film. Have any of you guys used Blender at all?
I've tinkered around with it, but I haven't really created anything.
Yeah, I've used it some, the older version. I haven't taken a look at it 3 yet, but I'm downloading it right now, actually.
Right. It's great. It's really great. Also, along those lines, Character Creator 4 and iClone 8 are coming, I think, in the first quarter of 2022. And I think, personally, and Damien will talk about this as well, because he uses it in his machinima creation. But I think the Omniverse machinima tool is in sort of low key development, and it's still really clunky and hard to use. Whereas Reallusion is connected directly. It has its own, both Character Creator and Reallusion have their own direct connections to Omniverse. I think the real machinima element of Omniverse is Reallusion products. And I think they're going to go next gen, especially with iClone 8, because they developed an entirely new animation system that is almost drop and drag your animations, and then they automatically connect them. It looks really great. Damien, now you did a little crowdfunding to get to be able to buy iClone 8 for your next project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about the upgrade, and I thought we discussed this previously. The cost of upgrading to iClone 8 and Character Creator 4 is a lot higher than it used to be, and it was a little bit more than I was able to afford. So I thought, well, since 7 came out, I've kind of established quite a significant fan base with the Heir to the Empire series. So I thought, I'm going to ask them to see if anyone would be willing to help sort of crowdfund the upgrade. And I thought, even if they only get me halfway, I could probably fill in the rest myself. I wasn't expecting what really happened, which was to be fully funded within 3 hours.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you.
I put sort of 3 levels of funding. One was the minimum cost of buying the software, because that's on the website. And then it has that special offer where if you spend, I can't remember, $7.99 on content, you get
that's right,
the software for free. And then I worked at the highest one, which is if I want to be able to export into Omniverse or anything else, how much content would I need to upgrade to the export licenses? So that was the highest one, and I reached that in 3 hours. And I just kind of released the video, and then I went to eat and watch Star Trek, and I thought I'll post this on Facebook later. But by the time I came back, I was at sort of like 80% funded.
Oh wow, man, that's awesome!
Yeah, so I'm very pleased with all my generous fans, and as a special thank you to them, I'm putting together a movie edit of Heir to the Empire Chapter 1 to 16, which I'm going to release before Christmas. Which by the time anyone listens to this will be out, so there'll be a link in the show notes for it.
Oh, that's so great! That's so great.
Well,
Damien, what is the, just out of interest for somebody who maybe doesn't want to go the purchase content to get those for free route? What is has the pricing been announced for if someone wants to buy iClone 8 and Character Creator 4 without going that route? What the price is going to be?
Yes, it's on the website, which I don't remember the prices offhand.
Oh, then I'll look it up. That's no problem.
There's a if you're buying it new, there's a one price, but if you've already got iClone 7, there's an upgrade price, which is, I think it's $100 cheaper than if you're buying it new.
Okay.
So existing users do get a little bit of a benefit there.
Sure.
We'll be sure to put a link in to that so people can check it out.
Yeah. So now, I've been trying out the Omniverse plugin as well, because they released the Omniverse export option into iClone 7, so people can try it out now rather than waiting for iClone 8.
How's that been working for you?
As far as the actual export process it's basically a matter of press the export button, and you wait a few minutes for it to do all the processing, and then your file you can then load up into Omniverse straight away. So that is very painless.
Hold on, let me just, so I want to make sure to remember these steps. So you press
Phil, get it together, man.
the what button? Export?
Yeah, export button.
I'll finish that later. I'll do a video tutorial on that. That'll be good.
Yeah. You can go really in depth with this. That tutorial.
Yeah.
So there are some limitations with it at the moment, which my understanding is Reallusion are working on the parts that they can. So if you've got any particle effects in iClone, those will not transfer over to Omniverse. So that's explosions or fog and mist effects or anything like that. Those won't transfer over. But Omniverse has its own particle system, so you could, in theory, create your project, ignore the particle elements in iClone, and then add them in Omniverse. Omniverse is still developing the particle system in a way that would be really helpful. Either that, or I haven't figured out how to use it properly yet. But as far as I can tell, there's no way to turn effects on at certain points in the timeline. They're on from the beginning. So if you want an explosion to happen, the explosion is going to happen right at the beginning.
I'm sure sure they're working on that.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely positive they're working on that, because their connection, Nvidia's connection to Reallusion has been long term. So I'm sure that so
that's just a current issue, which I'm sure will be fixed very soon. And the particle effects in Omniverse looks fantastic.
I know.
I've tried some of the fire and the smoke, and there's some test explosions where it kind of goes all orange and then goes dark as the heat dies down.
Yeah.
It looks all really impressive, and I can't wait to be able to use those kind of effects.
The advantage of going to Omniverse is that the rendering technology is absolutely contemporary. It's all ray traced, meaning that you can go from a reasonably good renderer from Reallusion to an absolutely fantastic renderer in Omniverse. Of course, now the requirements for being able to do Omniverse are pretty high. You have to have an Nvidia card that's of a certain stature, and even though the card market is getting a little looser, it's still kind of tough to get a cheap card. So there are some problems there. I wanted to ask you, Damien, what's made you excited about iClone 8 and Character Creator 4, the new additions they're doing?
Well, the Character Creator 4, I was looking at, there's a video of that's showing how the faces are going to be more animated, because they've got all these different ways you can make them more expressive than ever before, that's always really good to have, because otherwise they're just very static.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to being able to take advantage of things like that. With iClone, I like the idea of the new animation system.
Yeah.
Using a game controller to make the characters move around, and you can map the buttons to different types of animations. So you just press the button and it'll switch over to that one.
So
right, exactly. And I also recall that there's a path tracing that you can, or not tracing, but you can set up a path animation. So if you want the character to go to a certain place, and then holding props has been improved massively. That's
going to be really good as well, because it's so much. If you want to make the character's hands go together, what you often do is get sort of that, or if you want to hold a two-handed object, you attach it to one hand, but then the other hand has to match it perfectly, and that's such a pain to manually do
Yeah,
it. But now
yeah.
it's going to do it very well. Or putting your hands on the wall or on the floor or another character, that's going to be great, because so far it's being able to have two characters touch each other is such a nightmare that I just
Yeah.
tend to avoid it as much as possible. So things like that are really exciting for me.
This should work
And
really
once
well
again,
for you.
For the adult industry, again,
I was just going to
exactly what
say.
you were thinking, Ricky, with
Yeah.
the use of props and touching each other.
Yeah.
But we'll cover that on another show.
Yeah, we're going to have a special episode on that, a men-only episode. It's going to be a lot of fun with that one.
Oh boy.
Boy, we're starting off really well.
Woo!
Okay,
Happy New Year.
I want to talk about the last couple things. I saw a great video on YouTube called "The Best Space Games of 2022." Now, I knew about several of them, but I didn't know the whole history of space games. And this fellow who did it's actually a sort of a let's play thing, because he does playing in the middle of it, but he talks about new games that are coming out, brand new games, because apparently it's a trend due to the success of EVE Online and what's that, Space Citizen, I think?
Star Citizen.
Star Citizen, yeah. They've become very successful, and so there are a whole bunch of people that want to jump on that bandwagon and make some of that money. But there are also some older ones that have been around that I have never heard of that have gotten some recent updates. I was really impressed with the variety and different ways that the creators had of interacting in space situations. One of them is they call it Minecraft in space, because it's basically building. You're building stuff all the time. Looked absolutely fascinating. So I'm really going to follow this all through the year. Space games. I'm going to be looking at those and talking about them and sharing with them. And perhaps if I get my courage up, I'll actually make something in a space game. We'll see. But I'm specifically interested in Star Citizen. Although I have to say quickly, a lot of people I had read, machinima filmmakers have often commented how they don't want to use a certain kinds of applications because the learning curve is too hard. Well, I watched a short video on introduction to Star Citizen. I was completely lost after the first 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, it was talk about complex. The introduction to that and getting ready and getting everything set was just like, basically you just have to quit your job, sit down, get another monitor, and start taking notes, because it was really hard. So if you're a gamer and you're willing to put that kind of time into the game, then you should be able to put the time into learning how to model and write better, Anyway, we'll put a link to that. I also wanted to posit the quick question about open world games in Machinima. We've loved Star Citizen stuff last year. Why do these open world games interest Machinima filmmakers? And when did open world games start in terms of Machinima history? So I was wondering whether you guys were thinking about any of those questions.
We had a chat about this some time ago, didn't we, about open world. And I think really one of the key things is to do with the fact that they are just massive environments where the focus is on immersion and role play and mirror worlds and all of that kind of stuff. And I guess one of the key things with them is they keep the player engaged because of this massive environment that they've created, where it's clear that the game and the environment continues or persists well beyond what you do as a player in a particular point in time. So it's kind of, you keep going back in because, well, a little bit like you were sort of saying with Star Citizen, then the learning curve's kind of high, but what you can do in it is just endless because it's so vast, and the number of permutations of experience that you can have in there is just so huge. I mean, we know, for example, hundreds of people that are still in Second Life, even though that launched 2003. Was it 2003, or goes back even earlier than that for some? So yeah, I guess it's the vastness of it that's one of the attractive things.
Right.
I
Well,
think the ability to be modified, the world to be modified by the users, is also huge, and I think is a big part of what was attractive about Second Life when it was at its peak, and for the people that are there now, the fact that you can make the world. Probably not a big element of a game like Star Citizen to modify it to those kinds of degrees. So it just goes to show that just giving an expansive world to play in is enough to interest people. But if you really take it to the next level with, the true sandbox style game, I mean, look at Minecraft. It's been 15 years, and it's still one of the most played games in the world.
Yep.
Well, they're constantly adding more ability for the player to create and build and use new materials for it and stuff. And so, yeah, games like that are appealing because the replay value is unlimited for an environment like that, So
plus you have the razors and blades business model, which is you continually offer new content, some of which you have to buy. You know what I mean? So they have one product like a razor, and then you have to keep buying blades in order to enjoy
the Sims franchise. They've been very successful with that. I mean, if you were to get the Sims 4 and all the content packs at retail price, I mean, you're spending probably $1,000 on that game. Amazingly.
Yeah.
So it makes the pricing of something like iClone 7 or 8, all of a sudden it's like, well, that's not unreasonable after all, is it?
Yeah.
And considering that, I can tell you the learning curve for making Machinima in The Sims is no friendlier, no easier than making it in iClone or anything like that. In any of the games, I mean, look at Red Dead Redemption. It's hardly modifiable at all, really, and it's so hard to use. So I think that was a great point, Ricky. That I know that was my hesitancy back when I was just using games to take on a platform like Movie Storm or iClone or whatever the choices were back then. It was intimidating, even for me, who had developed quite a bit of skill set to some particular games, and I feared that they wouldn't translate over, but they do. They kind of do. The skills do translate. So.
What about WoW? Does that translate as well?
I think WoW is one of the first really popular games that had an open world aspect, for sure.
That's World of Warcraft.
Having never played it, I can't speak to specifics. I never played the game. But I had lots of friends who did, and they would talk about it. And it had immense replay value because, to at least some degree, you could chart your own path and spend your time in that game doing what you wanted to do. So, I if I'm not mistaken, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Ben Grucy at one point when he was playing WoW, he just went in there to do farming, which when he told me that, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? This is before I started playing Minecraft, where, much of what you do is building contraptions to farm resources. So I get it now. But then there were others who went in there specifically to raid others, in combat, and and others who wanted to just explore the world. And they created an environment where they didn't tell you how you had to play the game. They just told you what the possibilities were and then let you run with it. It was a brilliant move on their part.
Right. Now, my theory is that the modern video game is the contemporary equivalent of novel reading. In that you become so involved in the characters and in the world that the characters start triggering your imagination. And that's another advantage of working in an open world, because you find yourself drawn or imaginatively or emotionally moved or touched by a certain scenario or even a certain location. And that triggers the idea of stories. So then you feed it back by going, well, what if, like, for example, in the Half-Life saga, there's a young woman when you first get off the train and you come in and she's right next to the railing there. And she's saying, was there another person on that train? Was there another? I always wondered about her story. What's her backstory? Who was she waiting for? And so those sorts of events and experiences trigger the idea of making movies out of them. So you get a little feedback. And I was curious with you, Phil, you made what was my favorite film last year, Obit, your great Western film, in Red Dead Redemption 2, an open world. Did some of that trigger your feelings so that you ended up coming up with this idea for the story of a person coming back to a funeral?
This is a weird thing to confess, but I mean,
No,
I
no
played,
adult film industry stuff, please.
no, not this time. But I watched other people's Let's Plays of Red Dead Redemption 2 for a year before I bought the game, because I just didn't feel like I had the time to take on a game that I knew had that big of a story world. And then when I bought the game, I probably played the first hour of the single player campaign. And then you and I had our hijinks trying to do multiplayer. But my exposure to the story world of that game was largely through other people's videos. Weird as that sounds. I didn't play the game because I didn't have time. So it's really strange. I learned vicariously about some of the things that were possible in that game. I don't know what the spark moment was to decide, yeah, this is the environment I want to tell this particular story in. I don't remember how that happened, honestly. But I think it was before I bought the game. And then when I got it and actually started, hands-on controlling it a little bit, I thought, oh, okay, I could probably do this, So, yeah, it's weird.
How about that location where the funeral scene takes place? Was that something that you looked for and found, or had you already seen it and decided to use it from memory?
No, that I stumbled upon it. My exploration began. I was just looking. I basically found a list online where someone had documented all of the cemeteries throughout Red Dead Redemption 2. And so I just went and just started roaming the world, exploring, looking at those. And none of them were right for what I wanted to do. And I realized that I wanted it to be more of the old-fashioned type of burial, that someone would just be buried right on their own land, back before the laws dictated everybody be buried in one place.
Right.
In the West, that's not always the way it went. You just couldn't do that. So a person would be buried on their land. And so I thought, well, let's find a homestead that has some land near it. And yeah, I just then I started looking at different houses that were a little bit off the beaten path, not in the middle of town. And then, yeah, I had it narrowed down to a couple different ones, and ultimately that one just felt right. I liked that cop trees, the shade that it provided and the ambience there. So yeah, it was very accidental.
Wow.
I was thinking about what you were saying about what we've been talking about, this freedom that brings the imagination alive in these open world games. 30 or I guess 40 years ago, the only place you could do that was pen and paper role-playing games. And now 40 years later, the video game industry is almost caught up to that in terms of that was the ultimate freedom is, one person, the dungeon master, would craft this storyline of sorts and talk the characters through it. And it was all, oral sharing of information and dice rolls and things like that. And a lot of improvisation could happen there, where it really was at whoever was controlling the story, it was at their whim to just, oh, they did this. Well, that's interesting. Then I'm going to have this happen. And video games just never could rival that. And they still can't really. But it leads me to one of the things that I found interesting about this Game Awards was a game that's been announced called Star Wars Eclipse. By, I think it's Quantic Dream. Am I saying that right, Tracy? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Quantic Dream.
There's no gameplay shown yet. It's all just pre-rendered cinematics and stuff of very beautiful looking, mysterious looking Star Wars-y stuff, which is cool. But what caught my eye about it was their description that they're going for an intricately branching storyline. Now, people were using terms similar to that 10 years ago, you know, in video games, but then it ended up, you know, it was within the limits of what could be done. I'm really intrigued by someone embarking on that today with all we've been observing with AI.
Yeah.
And all these things. I think that we're on the cusp of there being a video game that can literally adapt the story to the player.
I agree.
In unpredictable ways.
Yeah.
The reason I think that is the way that Minecraft works. Its worlds are procedurally generated. Absolutely 100% random every time you fire up a new world. And infinite in any direction. You can walk. A guy did a video a couple weeks ago and streamed it live, walking 1 million blocks, which 1 million, basically 1 million meters in Minecraft in one direction. And he live streamed it. Had to have somebody else take over while he used the restroom and ate and things like that, you know. But and the game they've got an algorithm that generates caves going way down and mountains and trees and all this stuff, all just procedurally generated, all random. There's no two that are alike. Well, that's just with terrain and objects and things like that. But the fact that they're able to do that, I think that the next real innovation for story-based games will be a story that can effectively do that.
I think,
which is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Because imagine if you make a friend at the beginning, and that friendship grows and moves in different directions, as opposed to a single line. Yeah. You know, where the person is always a friend to you, or at some point stops being your friend and is your enemy. Instead, you'll have a whole range of things where they'll be angry at you because you did some action and they don't want to see you. You know what I mean? And all of that will be AI generated based on data that the game is actually taken from you while you're playing it.
Yeah, it's almost scary to think about, because that is amazing. If we think about, there's been movies made about this, sci-fi movies made about this, where every choice you make, the Marvel universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe, plays with this with their metaverse idea.
Yeah.
Certain choices that then branch off, and they refer to that as that's a new universe. Well, really, that's just, there's different choices. Every choice, you know, can have the potential effect to take things in a totally different direction. And it was very hard just a few years ago even to conceive of a video game, a computer program being able to keep up with that, you know, with how life actually works. I feel like it's getting close, man, to where it's at least a Matrix-like believable scenario.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
where it reacts in a way that seems real. That's crazy, man.
Good point.
I'm looking forward to it.
You guys need to check out some of Quantic Dreams' older games. Like the most recent one they released was called Detroit Become Human. And it's not AI driven the way you're describing there, but it does have a branching story where basically it follows 3 different characters, and you play through one chapter, and then you make different choices and so on, and then you switch over to another character, and then you do the same thing with them, and then they switch over to the third character, and it alternates between that. But there's so many different ways that the story can change based on what you do in each time. And I've only played through it once, and I imagined trying to play through it again and seeing, well, what can I do differently? Because it's way beyond something like Mass Effect, where you make decisions and you get different branches. This is more of a web, I would say, because of the way it interacts. So it'd be interesting to see how they take that from what they did there in Detroit to the Star Wars game and enhance that.
And it could be that all they're going to do is apply that same method to the Star Wars universe. And if so, it's still going to be a really interesting and fun game to play, I think. But what I'm interested in is a developer like Quantic Dreams eventually coming to the point where they can basically set the parameters and the AI takes over the storytelling.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, it's a really interesting.
Wild.
It's a really interesting development. Not least because Quantic were another one of those developers that was like Unreal and Unity that emerged in the early well, in fact, the mid 90s, I think they emerged. But by the early 2000s, they were in fact at what we really know as the forefront of developments in interactive experiences, and they were called interactive dramas, and they were compared to adventure games, but they weren't really either film or game, and they kind of lost their way a little bit. But it was their real-time 3D engine that was used for motion capture for the first time, actually, in a 2004 film called Immortal, and it was one of the earliest times that a game engine was used to provide digital assets as a cinematic backdrop for a film.
Huh.
So, you know, we often think that things like The Matrix, Bullet Time and what have you was one of the earliest applications of this sort of real-time filmmaking stuff, but it wasn't at all. It was Quantic that was at the back of that. And they've evolved in a very sort of different way to Unreal and Unity, which are basically, I think, their competitors. And I think what's quite interesting is that they've now re-emerged and are sort of, you know, lining up probably alongside the likes of Unreal and Unity to sort of reclaim that space. But they've done it in mega style with Star Wars, I think. I mean, Ben and I talked about Quantic alongside an organisation called Brilliant Digital Entertainment, whom nobody in the Machinima community had ever really heard of, but they were the guys that made what was known as the first branching narrative experience, which was called Cyberswine. And that was launched in the mid-90s. But these guys had, you know, BDE had sort of like world domination in their sights. And they tried to, you know, work on Marvel Universe type stuff way back then as a way to sort of create interactive experiences out of those stories, if you like. So we in the book, Ben and I wrote about an alternative beginning for Machinima, which came out of these engines.
Fascinating.
I think what's quite interesting, though, I think, and I don't really fully understand why, because maybe Damien's got a bit of insight into this. Most of the comments about Quantic's involvement in Star Wars Eclipse is actually negative. Don't know why.
Huh.
I haven't really been following the response to it from Star Wars fans, but my guess is because so they have all these tie-in books and so on with the Star Wars franchise, and that all got reset when Disney took over because they wanted a clean slate to create new content. And so they started releasing a new series of books to go alongside the new films and so on that were being released. But they ran into the problem with they had to rely on the films, viewers watching the films who hadn't read the books. So they couldn't have any major events happen in the books that fans would feel lost because they hadn't read them. So nothing was happening in the books that was actually made them worth reading. So what they did is they created this new era about 300 years before the films, where they kind of got a blank slate to play around with. And it's called the High Republic era. And
which is what this game is to be set in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's been a mixed response to that era of books. Some people really love it, and some people don't. Personally, I feel like they've released so much content already that it's impossible to keep up. I started listening to the audiobook of the first one, and I was it's very interesting, and I was enjoying the setting. But I looked to see what was coming next, and within weeks there was going to be 5 more books. And this launched in January last year, 2021.
Yeah.
And I looked after the Eclipse trailer, there's 25 books that have been released already. And there's comic books to go alongside it as well. I thought, there's no way anyone could keep up with that. I mean, at least you're a really dedicated fan. There's more dedicated than I am, because I haven't. I gave up on it. Because I thought, it's not going to end
is
in
complicated
that one book.
when it spans millennia. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, how in the world could anyone control it?
That's my personal take on this era. So I'm hoping they design the game so you can enjoy the game without having to read all those other books that go alongside it, because I don't want to do that just to play one game.
So let's make sure we follow up on that, Damien, and keep an eye open for it. Can you close us out with the rest of the Game Awards for 2021?
Yeah. So this this Star Wars game was announced at the Video Game Awards. I stayed up watching the whole thing. Luckily, I had virtual company with a friend of mine who lives locally. Who she decided she also wanted to stay up because she was very excited to see the Matrix side of things, which we'll come to at the end. So it was kind of a mix of awards for games that had been released, and we had various celebrities coming up to present the awards. And then, of course, most of the show was actually new game announcements, just trailers for new things or games that had already been announced, but they were showing off the gameplay for the first time. And so there was just so many of those. I don't know which of these games are going to be any good for Machinima or not, but there's a lot of really impressive and exciting things were announced.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm really excited for Homeworld 3, which is going to be released at the end of the year, unless it gets delayed, of course, because I've been a big fan of the Homeworld games for a long time. That could be useful for Machinima because it's a big space strategy game. We have these epic battles, so you could have your virtual camera in there and you could record these spaceships flying around shooting each other. I've used the older games for space battles in Machinima before, so I'm excited to see what this new one can do.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got the Star Wars game announcement. I'm not sure if it's going to be any good for Machinima, but there's a new Dune strategy game. Obviously, because of the film that was just released, Dune's kind of getting a lot of attention. And rightly so. So I'm excited about this new game. I'm probably just going to play it. I'm not going to worry about making any films with it.
Well, we'll put a link in there so you can look through it and see what you find interesting. There's also a lot of end of the year and indie games that aren't mentioned in the big game awards that are done by smaller companies, including one or two games that are done by single individuals. And we'll put a link to all of that. So, Tracy, can you close our news and discussion segment with your Matrix experience?
Wow.
News?
Well, I didn't actually stay up like Damien did to watch.
It was 4 o'clock in the morning by the time we got to this Matrix part.
Well, so I watched instead the film, the 10-minute film that they put out afterwards, or at least at the same sort of time. And wow, was my take on it, really.
Yeah, me too.
So what this was, obviously, by the time that our show goes out, everybody in the world will probably have seen it. But let me just reflect on it a minute. So what we've got here is mocap of the key actors demonstrating, the sort of the capture of the characters from the original trilogy, as well as how the characters look now. And quite frankly, even though, as I understand it, they were all virtual characters, you can't really tell what's real and what's virtual in there. It was brilliant.
No, you can't. Yeah,
it's pretty impressive, isn't it? I think there's only one bit where I thought maybe that was actually Keanu Reeves for real, which is the bit in the mirror, but I wasn't 100% sure in the end. Anyway, what I think was quite interesting about this was the fact that actually it's being released. So you've got this little bit of an introduction, then you've got some demonstration of the experience itself. It's not a game, it's an experience. You can download this content and you can do what the hell you like with it. It's being badged as a proof of concept, designed to showcase Unreal Engine 5's cutting edge real-time systems. And it's all being made as an open world example, so you can literally do anything you want with it. And it's totally free with Unreal Engine 5. So I think it's brilliant. I think the fact that it's being made available for anybody to do anything with is absolutely awesome. I can't wait to see some machinima being created with it.
Me too. And I was thinking, what a fascinating combination of advertisement and entertainment.
Absolutely.
I don't think I've seen one as good as that in a long time. where they're
Right.
selling you something, but they're doing it in such an entertaining way that you don't care, you know?
I think it's I think that alone is fascinating. But so I know obviously Mark Pettit because I interviewed him for the book that Damien and I did as well, and so I'm linked to him on LinkedIn. He posted something which was really the size of this open world that they've created. So the city is 4,000 kilometers wide by nearly 5,000 kilometers long, slightly larger than the size of downtown LA. The city surface is nearly 8 kilometers squared. The city perimeter is 14.5 kilometers long.
Wow.
There's 260 kilometers of roads in the city. There are 512 kilometers of sidewalk in the city. There's 1,250 almost intersections in the city. There's 45,000 parked cars, of which 38,000 are drivable and destructible. There's 17,000 simulated traffic vehicles on the roads that are destructible as well. 7,000 buildings, nearly 28,000 lampposts and streets on street sides, 12,500 sewer holes, almost 10 million unique and duplicated assets created to make the city.
Wowee.
Isn't that incredible? And,
That is
and on
unreal.
top of that, hang on, 35,000 simulated meta-human pedestrians. Can you believe it? I mean, what an
Astonishing.
environment.
So now, if somebody wanted to download that, how would they go about doing it?
Well, okay, so you need Damien, you can help me on this one. Which version of
You need the latest Xbox or PlayStation consoles. At the time,
neither of
we
which I
record
have, by the way.
this- No, I don't either. But at the time we record this, they're not going to release it on PC. But I hope enough people say, please release it on PC, that they actually change their mind and release it so we can all give it a try.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they won't do that. Maybe they won't. Maybe what it's about is getting you to buy the hardware.
Well, we'll see. You know, and there's still a lot of machinima filmmakers that use the Xbox, so we'll see how that turns out. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for that. A lot of really interesting news for January 2022. So that's our news and discussion podcast. We'll be having a video of this up on our new YouTube channel. Also, the podcast itself will come out. We'll have links to everything we've talked about here, and possibly some drawings from Phil in Canva as a special treat for everybody. So you could please contact us. We do want to do practical. Oh no, he's doing it. Don't show it to us, Phil. So we want to do practical, special practical podcast. Please send us your ideas for things you'd like us to cover. I want to do sound and writing, but there may be some other things, specific games. Also, contact us. Let us know. Give us some feedback. Send us one of your films. If it's awful, we won't show it. If it's good, we'll talk about it. So that's it for this episode. Thank you very much. Check out next week when we'll be talking about films for January 2022. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.